Public Works Department. This item is the introduction of a preliminary rate resolution for the non-ad valorem assessment for the stormwater management utility system. On August 21st, 2007, the board adopted an ordinance creating the stormwater management utility system and based the collection as a non-ad valorem assessment and set the rate as an equivalent residential unit, which is with an equivalent square footage of 2,890 square foot, which is essentially what a single-family home in Pasco County has as total impervious. On September 10, 2007, the board established the rate of $47 per ERU for the 2007 tax year. That rate has remained constant for the past 8 years. Today, we have a rate resolution which includes a $10 increase from $47 to $57 per year. I have Scott McClellan of Camp Dresser and McKee here, who has a short PowerPoint presentation to explain the need for the increase.
Chairman Schrader and Commissioners, and Ms. Baker, thank you very much for hearing me again. I'll have a short presentation about the stormwater program.
Click the right button on the clicker.
All right. This is the what I'll be talking about, a little bit of the history, what the county has done for stormwater management, and where we are and where we're going in the near future. Prior to your adoption of the utility, there was a focus group that was formed and met before y'all did. Here is the makeup of that group of stakeholders who talked about the stormwater program over a period of time. I think it was about 10 meetings where we talked all sorts of stormwater management issues. Ultimately, the big suggestion that they made to the county administrator at that time was that they recommended level of service B for the county over a period of 10 years. Level of service B is characterized by a more proactive approach to stormwater management as opposed to reactive, which you were at the time. The board chose to achieve level of service C for everything but capital improvements, and they chose a level of service D. Ultimately, that came to a rate of $47 per year per ERU, and as Mike said, an ERU is defined as 2,890 square feet of impervious area. The board also instructed the staff to reconvene the focus group in 3 to 5 years to reconsider what has been done and readdress potential capital funding. From 2007 to 2014, the organization has been streamlined, and the focus was mostly on major maintenance and rehabilitation of ponds and ditches. There was a completion of some capital improvements, and then in June of 2012, Capital Storm Debbie came along and added to your woes, made stormwater a focus that needed to be dealt with even at a higher pace. The Stormwater Focus Group met again in 2011 and met for over about a year. Here are the participants, a slightly smaller group but similar in nature. We did go in the field and look at stormwater improvements that had been done at the time. They ultimately focused on policy related to operation and maintenance. There were some inconsistencies that needed to be straightened out, and they helped us on that. And we did spend time talking about capital improvements. Ultimately, to a large degree, they recommended a higher pace than what you were moving on, and even to the point of bonding if that would increase the ability to do capital improvements. Let me take a minute to talk about the 4 programs and categories of stormwater management operations that you have achieved over the last 7-8 years. First one is program management. That's basically planning and administration. Good news is you completed 16 out of 19 basins. Most counties haven't done it at this level, so that's really a good thing to do. You've also done FEMA floodplain maps, so we believe that you have achieved a higher level than C. Again, the level of service analysis is A through F, just like you do a regular grade. So as C is passing, and you've achieved a little bit higher than that, mostly using stormwater utility revenues. For NPDES compliance, NPDES stands for National Discharge Elimination System. MS4 is a short for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System, 4 S's. It's a federal permitting process for stormwater, and it's related to stormwater quality only. You have recently, in December of last year, received a new permit, and it's very highly related to maintenance and requires you to commit to do a certain level of maintenance and increase inspection on a number of activities that are related to stormwater, including construction and maintenance and inventory all your stormwater assets, which you have started doing quite well.
Can I
Can
I stop you right
Yeah,
there?
sure.
Because I got a question in terms of the private sector and their responsibility, because I'm assuming that they have similar permits and they're required to maintain those facilities as well.
They have permits from the Water Management District, and they are required to maintain their systems as well. The maintenance that I'm talking about here are county-owned facilities only.
I understand that, but it's still, a lot of these sort of tie in together because
Yes.
we're doing stormwater management throughout Pasco County. So is the county taking on the responsibility of some of these requirements that the private sector is supposed to be maintaining?
The complication is that's changed over the last couple of years simply because the Water Management District, as I understand it, is not doing as much inspection as they used to. They used to do a lot of inspection of private
So you're
facilities.
still avoiding the answer.
So I don't know that he's avoiding it, it's not very clear territory. So where there is a new developer and an active CDD, HOA, and/or the developer is still in charge of the CDD, they are doing their maintenance. They get their permit from the Water Management District. The Water Management District is supposed to do their inspections, and they're supposed to do the operations and maintenance. That's working fairly well, and if we get a complaint from a citizen, we refer it to the Water Management District, and they respond and they handle that. Where the problem is in older subdivisions that no longer have a CDD, no longer have a developer, no longer have, in many cases, an active HOA, and when the system starts to fail, the residents typically don't have the resources to do themselves. We have held most of that at bay. The second reconvening of the Stormwater Task Force specifically talked about those issues. Should we be taking over those ponds? Should we be taking over more of that system? And the decision was made that we're responsible for the road drainage, and we would take it to the culvert outlet. And then they would be responsible from where the culvert outlet goes on. There have been a couple of situations where we have tiptoed in to help cautiously, but it's a very slippery slope.
It is. And that's the reason why I bring up the question.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. NPDES in particular is a federal permit. It's administered by the state of Florida. There's compliance is pretty much required at level of service C. If you do not comply, there is potential penalties involved. Operation and maintenance is the majority of the work that's been done over the last couple of years. Major cleanup of neglected facilities, over 24 projects have been done, and you can see an example here where the canal was not being maintained, but after major maintenance, it is now operating the way it's supposed to. Most of the work is contracted maintenance. There's a lot of work out there to be done. We believe you've achieved a level of service C minus at certain points of the game at level of service C. Next one is capital improvements. You have studied most of the systems, and the larger projects were not reasonable to do because they were not. They were going to deal with a small amount of folks with a huge expense, so the cost benefit was not there to a large degree. So your projects tended to be smaller in nature, and the county is slowly working on that. The level of service C plus is what you've achieved over time, and I'll make that clearer in a minute. But most of that has been done based upon fund balance, not the utility itself. Although the utility has done some help, the majority of it has been with fund balance. The fund balance, of course, is created by not spending all the utility revenue that you have created. And here's a list of completed projects that we have on hand. Okay, so Let me show you a little bit about the expenses versus where it's been expended, and I believe you have a copy of this particular graph in a larger form, so maybe you can see it. This is the budgeted revenues by source. This information we looked at over 7,000 records related to your expenses, as well as CAFR report and budget documents and so forth and so on. This shows from the start of the utility in 2000, fiscal year 2008, to fiscal year 2016, which is budget. The blue is the stormwater utility revenue. The purple is state revenue, and you can see that there has been some cooperative funding from the state over a period of time. That's helped a little bit. It's a small amount, but it is something. And the green is fund balance, and I'll show you why there has been a fund balance over time. Miscellaneous revenues in red. This is a little bit more complicated, but it shows you where the stormwater money has been spent, in what category. The blue line right here is the revenue from the stormwater utility. On the vertical axis is the amount. The bottom is the fiscal year. And you can see that in fiscal year 08, the revenue was higher than the expenses. That's what we expected. We knew that the program was going to take some time to build up. And the good news is that over that build-up time, you created some fund balance, which is the difference between the blue line and the bar, in order to do capital improvements. The green is NPDS. The gray, which is now the larger component of the program, which is consistent with most other stormwater programs, is operation and maintenance, and the yellow is capital improvements. So you can see that the fund balance has moved over to the capital improvements, and you've been able to achieve a higher level of service for capital improvements because you've had that fund balance, and that's a good thing to do. In 2016, there's a little bit of fund balance that's been committed that goes beyond where the utility revenue is, but at this point, that is committed and is no longer available for the stormwater program.
So I for the most part, I know what O&M is, but maybe you can explain the difference between capital and O&M in terms of the stormwater management.
Mr. Garrett. I can, but you're the business owner, so would you please?
Because I see the O&M getting larger and larger and larger, so are we creating something that we got to keep maintaining?
No, Commissioner. Actually, what's happening in O&M, one of the big chunks that's going in there is replacement of some of these very old culvert systems that have been failing. And also, we've been using about $1.5 million a year to recover major drainage systems that we never maintained before. So those are additions. Those have been additions to the stormwater system.
The real question is, what's the difference between a capital and an O&M in terms of stormwater management? It looks to me like it's pretty much all O&M.
Well, so O&M is somebody else built it, and now we're maintaining it to make sure it functions. Capital would be we're going to build something new to address a stormwater problem.
An example is the Thousand Oaks Capital, or now the Trinity Oaks that we're working on. Those are capital projects. We do some small ones where we install new stormwater systems when we found flooding, and those are considered capital. We also, I believe, have some of our studies. No, our studies not in it, just the work from the studies. But the capital is something new, as County Administrator stated.
I still don't know the answer to my question. Commissioner Stark?
I see a pretty rapid growth. I see pretty rapid growth here. So are we projected to keep going in this trajectory, or?
So what you can see by that gray bar being cut is Mike and I negotiating what he would cut in order to stay within the budget of the current revenue. And that would be a significant reduction in major maintenance. So when people call and they say, Bear Creek, for example, the creek is not flowing, we're afraid we're going to flood, we go in and we have the contractor remove vegetation and siltation. That's O&M major maintenance. A culvert in between two homes fails, and now those homes are at risk of flooding, and we go in and replace that culvert. And I think during the presentation that Mike made at the workshop, he showed you a picture of our crews working in the ditch. That's major maintenance. The bottom line is we have very old stormwater management systems that have reached end of life. And so O&M includes repair and replacement of those. But if we have to live within our budget, we would cut O&M spending. We would, instead of hiring the contractor, one of Michael's proposals is to create a crew. It would be less expensive over time for us to do the work in-house and contracting. But until he can gin that up, we'd have to cut back on maintenance, and people would be on the waiting list longer. We have a bunch of culvert replacement projects on the waiting list. We have, we get new requests for service every day, and the waiting list would just take longer before we would get to it if we have to live within the current budget.
Okay, but I guess the older systems are failing, and so the need is becoming more and more. I'm just wondering if that's
that is an increasing, that's a growth curve. Yes, ma'am, it is. Because all systems, all infrastructure requires repair and replacement, whether it's a utility system for water and sewer, or for stormwater, or a road, or a building. You have to maintain it, and it will reach end of useful life, and you'll have to replace it. And unfortunately, the infrastructure that occurred in the building boom of the 70s is now old and is starting to fail.
Well, it's one thing to go replace a culvert in some of those old developments, like Quill Hollow, for instance, that was built well below minimum flow levels, because when the water stain is 6 feet above your front door, it ought to tell you you're probably it's going to flood. But the roads that were built, the culverts are old, and so they're replacing them. To me, that's O&M, that's not capital. But if you're going in and completely redesign the entire drainage system for that area, that's, I'm assuming, capital, and then we got to maintain what we built. Is that?
So Duck Slough is a good example of that, where because of the flooding that we experienced in previous events, and then most recently in Tropical Storm Debbie, we are cooperatively partnering with the Water Management District and the legislature to do a combination of repair and replacement. BMP 6, for example, replacing an existing weir is repair and replacement, but constructing BMP 1 and BMP 5 are new projects. We're adding new drainage facilities there, but in that instance, we were able to use partnered funding in order to get it done. So there's a bit of capital and repair and replacement in that overall project.
Just another example of they're looking for the more urban type services on a county-wide basis. Commissioner Stark.
And I'm sorry I wasn't here to see the beginning of your presentation. I caught a plane at 5:20 this morning to get here. But last time, I think at the workshop, I asked if we had any numbers.
Two handouts in front of
The
you.
cooperative funding.
Oh, I don't know. Did we get the answer for that yet?
We do not have the answer. We can give you an image. The purple here is cooperative funding. We are looking at the individual records, and we'll give you an exact number, exactly who's providing that state funding in the near future. I don't have it in specificity right now.
Because SwiftMud should be able to give that to us. Not, you shouldn't have to go pay for
Commissioner,
it.
most of the cooperative funding we did with the district was in watershed planning, where we paid them. Okay, so we received money for some major projects such as Rocky Sink and Duck Slough and now Thousand Oaks. But those are definitely capital, and they are, we're no longer really able to do that. Timber Oaks is a good example where it's going to be cooperatively funded, but the citizens are going to have to pay the half through an MSBU. So I think that's where we are in the future. We will not be doing large capital projects with the districts unless we have an MSBU to pay.
Well, I just want to be sure we're paying money in, and I just want to make sure that in their cooperative funding pool, we're getting money out.
We're a donor county to this date, but we'll get you those numbers. I think our residents have paid more in Water Management District millage than they have received in cooperative funding projects.
Commissioner Moore.
Mr. Garrett, you brought it up about a second ago about the MSBU's. I know we have a lot of the old road and bridge districts one in my district where I live, that I cover, for example, how many of those old road and bridge districts do you think we're maintaining at this time? And how many of those fall under an MSBU for the O&M?
To my knowledge, there were only a few. The most noteworthy is Lake Paget, where we didn't get an MSBU. The Road and Bridge District, I think, was essentially bankrupt, had about $1.5 million in debt when it came to us. The Fox Ridge or Pasco Heights Road and Bridge that we just dissolved, and then the last remaining one that I'm aware of is the Highlands. And the issue with the Highlands, I think I presented it before, is almost all roads, $5 million worth of roads that need to be done. Now, the MSBUs, I mean, it was mentioned earlier, Chairman Schrader mentioned private systems. When the stakeholder committee met, it was clear that if we were to take over a private stormwater system, then it would have to be an MSBU. They would have to pay, because that would be the only fair way.
Commissioner Mariano?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the state cooperative funding, from what I'm looking at with the purple numbers, it seems very low. And I got to think, even with Dutch Slough, there's like a year with $1 million. Back even a few years ago, there's another $1 million. You're saying that you don't have it together as far as these grants aren't factored into this purple slot?
No, they are.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
The grants are in this purple money,
Yes,
so,
the grants that we have. And I would add that Bruce probably needs to talk. I think he gets the majority of the Swift Mud Kit funding. You know, that's primarily where their funding is, in utility, reclaimed water, and things like that. So this is just the stormwater portion.
Okay. On the capital that you've got going through, where is it factored in the, let's say, the $1 million that you bought Nottingham property? Is that under the capital?
Which property?
the purchase of the Nottingham property.
The Nottingham property was capital 3 years ago. Yeah, 2 to 3 years ago. It was $800,000.
Okay. Another question. Do you have a list of all the projects that you want to accomplish and what's going to be done through this whole system? As far as if this increase is granted, or even just regardless of that, what the process is for the next 10 years, how you're going to spend the money with what you know for data right now?
Actually, what happens, Commissioner, is we probably get 1, 2, 3 new ones a month, the projects coming in. We have a pending list that we put on that we're not dealing with because we don't have the time, people, or money to deal with. So we're not out a long way with big projects. We are out a long way with replacements. We know what we have to replace now, but again, things are failing on a daily basis. So we don't have a giant 10-year capital plan. What we're doing is just small ones, and as they come in and request, we're trying to deal with them. So.
But I mean, even with, let's say, when we made the purchase with Nottingham, we foregoed $800,000 worth of individual projects that could have been done. There's got to be a long list when you were setting yourself up the first couple of years all the way through and that's coming through. Do you have at least what you've got right now? Can we see that list to what projects
Your
you want to do
master
and what the cost is
inventory.
going to be?
We have a large master list. We track. We can get you a copy of that, of what's going on right now, plus the ones that we haven't done.
So
that are on our list.
please remind the board that when we started down this path, CDM had done a stormwater master plan, and it had, I want to say it was with a B, the number of projects that were identified in the stormwater master plan. Do you, either one of you remember what that number was?
I believe it was, I don't want to get confused with TMDLs, but I thought it was $360 million.
So you should have a list as far as what things could be done then? Okay.
We do have a list, and what we found is that some of them aren't doable because they're not cost-effective and things like that. But, we've done quite a bit of engineering on projects. We've put some on the shelf because we don't have the money to build them.
Well, then maybe even using that data with your expertise, maybe put a recommendation list as far as what things are a good value, what's not a good value, and let us look at what we're going to use the money for.
But again, to make it clear, the ask today is not for capital projects. The ask today is to maintain major maintenance, O&M, permit compliance, and program maintenance. The current structure of the utility is major new projects. We design them, we permit them with the stormwater utility, but when it's time to go to construction, and Timber Oaks is an excellent example of that, the benefited residents bear the cost of the capital construction through the CIP. So we have a stormwater master inventory. We are continuing to update that and fine-tune that and put that into an electronic system versus notebooks. When it fails, we fix it with O&M money. But the new CIP stuff would have to be through MSBU's. The $10 increase in the stormwater utility would not even begin to touch new capital construction.
So I guess asked another way, without the increase, what would that delay?
We're going to delay major maintenance. We're not going to
Okay.
clean ditches. We're not going to repair culverts.
So that, to me, would be the information that I would like to have. And today's ask is to set this rate. It can always come down.
Yep.
There's
That's
still a
correct,
public
Commissioner.
hearing that has to be conducted.
Right.
But today is basically just set the rate at the maximum that this board wants to go up, or the staff is asked to take it to. I mean, it's almost a 21% increase.
We do have a list of what I cut, and our capital capability goes to practically zero. We will not have the engineering dollars to really engineer capital for MSBU's. I think, as I stated, I cut $1 million out of engineering. It's down to $400,000. The engineering for Timber Oaks is approaching $750,000 that we're eating. So we will not have the capability of doing anything large next year.
But we can bring you back that list once again.
We'll bring back a very good list, like I say before. We have until September, so we can bring back another one.
Move approval?
Well, let's see, what the recommendation
Alternative number
is.
one.
Alternative number one then is to authorize the chairman to execute the two original preliminary rate resolutions attached and direct the board records department to distribute the resolutions. It's to notify the property appraiser's office by July 15th. Everyone understand what we're doing?
So we're not actually approving the amount?
You are not approving the amount today, you're approving the maximum amount that's going to be advertised, and you still have a public hearing to actually set that rate. Is that right?
Correct, sir. So we don't actually adopt that rate till September, but it needs to be advertised in advance so that it can go on the trim.
So,
Because I still have a hard time, Mike, excuse me, Chairman, but is like a business plan, looking at it, seeing where we're at, needs versus wants. Obviously, I've got a few neighborhoods where we're dealing with these kind of things. So I see that. I just hope that going forward with HOAs and hopefully we can do a different job where they're hanging on to the HOA and we're not responsible in the end of it. Because I see the number go from 4 million to 11 million in just, 5 years. So it just, I hate to see that 11 go to for O&M. So it's, I'd love to see the projects and the priorities before I can, obviously approve or support any rate increase. That's my personal opinion.
well, I mean, to Commissioner Mariano's point, though, that if we have the information to us, whether it's you meet privately with staff or the county administrator, because having been here when we first adopted it, I remember the day when we didn't have any money, and now we had money to be able to address these problems.
Well, they need to be addressed.
But
no doubt.
in order for us to be able to be the ambassadors to, at least in my belief, the ambassadors to explain why the increase, we need to have that information to
Agreed.
be able to do just that. Commissioner Mariano.
And I don't want to give staff credit. The reason the numbers were so low as far as capital expenditure at the start is they had to put their plan together and do some research and engineering to get it to go work. And then I'm not alarmed by seeing the higher number of the capital expenditures because you knew that was going to come to go finish spending the money with the project they were designing. So I think you've done a good job with it. It just, I want to get more information before I'm going to push it forward.
All right. So,
And I'll second the motion.
so I do have a motion by Commissioner Mariano and a second by Commissioner Starkey, then for alternative number one, Commissioner Moore.
Quick question. When will these public hearings be held?
September 3rd or 4th, 2nd? Cindy says it's September 2nd, so it's already advertised. The stormwater utility and the county utility enterprise public hearings are held before we do the operating budget public hearings.
So there's plenty of time to discuss with all commissioners what projects we're talking about, what can be possibly lost, or what projects we need to prioritize.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'm good.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.